Thank you. All right. Thanks. All right, so let's talk a little bit about my favorite subjects: American steel, the environment, and the next decade. I did this before, here in 2015, when we talked about iron ore and the steel industry. At that time, 99% of the audience was really believing that iron ore prices would be free in the world in a few months, and apparently 99% of the industry was wrong. So I'm glad that the presentation is recorded, and you can go check to see that we can still talk about the next decade without fear, as long as you base your presentation in facts. And that's a thing that has been missing these days. So let's talk about my view for the next decade. Very first thing, prime scrap will become precious metal. Very expensive. Still good, just very expensive. Second, natural gas will emerge as the key to clean steel making. Don't forget, natural gas is hydrogen in disguise. Natural gas is, we are all metallurgists or people that have been dealing with the steel making. That's the beauty about the American Iron and Steel Institute. So natural gas is 95% CH4. There's a lot of hydrogen in CH4, and 4% of C2H6. It's a mix of methane and ethane. So it's a lot of hydrogen in natural gas. So natural gas is the key to clean steel making going forward. Third, steel making across the world will look a lot closer to what we have here in the United States. And what's that? Lots of electric arc furnaces. Only environmentally compliant pellets in blast furnaces. No sinter, no pollution, no PM 2.5. That's a lot worse than CO2, even though people don't talk about PM 2.5. A lot of direct reduction based on natural gas, and a lot of hot briquetted iron feeding both blast furnaces and electric arc furnaces. And last but not least, steel's inevitability in the world will allow for a prosperous period of return on capital, reinvestment, and modernization. The conversation about low-cost producer this, low-cost producer that is so yesterday. The steel business is a business. It's not a beauty contest. We are here at the end of the day to make money for ourselves, for our shareholders, for our employees, to provide a livelihood for the ones that depend on this industry. And there is only one way a business can survive: if the business can return capital to the investors. And that's what we have in front of us. It's already here. It's our job not to screw up. How can you do that? And how this steel inevitability in our future world will play? First, electric vehicles. It's reality right now. All single car manufacturers is working very hard to play catch up and produce battery electric vehicles. All of them. And good for us, Cliffs is a leader in advanced high-strength steels, stainless steel, and non-oriented electrical steels, which is key for the engines of the battery-powered vehicles. Also, we expect to have a modernization, a real modernization of the electrical grid. Think about a real fleet of electric vehicles that need to be recharged the same way you refuel the tank of your gas tank in a gas station. That's what we need. And in this country, we don't have that at this point. Think about the rolling blackouts in the West Coast and the problems in Texas. And these are places that are supposed to be trouble-free in terms of the electric grid. So we need that modernization. That needs to come. It's part of the infrastructure. We are happy that Cleveland-Cliffs is the sole producer and supplier of grain-oriented electric steels that go in transformers of all kinds in sizes, and that will be in high demand for this modernization. And last but not least, sustainable energy, which will become part of our day-to-day conversation, and will benefit not only Cliffs, but everybody that is in the business of producing and selling flat-rolled steel, plate, and lots of other things. But the good thing is that American steel companies as a whole will be entitled to returns on their invested capital. And we will be able to continue to move this industry forward and to continue to be this powerhouse that we are, the envy of the world in terms of the iron and steel business. Let's talk a little bit about the steel emissions for steel in comparison with other materials. We hear a lot of things, but nothing like good old data to check on the reality of things. CO2 emissions intensity adjusted for weight, just talking about scope 1 and scope 2, because these are the, unfortunately, until now, through this point, the only thing that we talk about. We don't talk much about scope 3, and I am starting to bring scope 3 to the conversation. But just scope 1 and scope 2, steel is like that. 1 metric ton of steel releases, here in the United States, 1 metric ton of CO2. And why I'm using 1 metric ton is because it's a rule of thumb. Each car that you see on the street, more or less, 1 metric ton of steel. So 1 metric ton of steel, 1 metric ton of CO2. You go to aluminum, and then we don't talk 1 ton anymore. We only talk 670 kilos, because aluminum is less dense than steel. So we are adjusting down the weight, but unfortunately the emissions are adjusted up. So the same thing with aluminum would release 6 times more emissions than steel. And let's be really modern, really high-tech. Let's be really California. Let's do cars with carbon fiber. Then it's a lot worse. It's a lot lighter, but a lot worse. Now we are already at 10 times. And then let's be really creative. Let's use magnesium. That will be in weight half of steel, but to be, now we are out of the chart. It's much better to go back to reality. And that's what we are going to have going forward. We are going to have steel. The problem is not steel. The problem is global warming. And CO2 is the proxy. So let's see how can we fix the CO2 problem in the world. Let's start where the problem is. The steel industry in the United States releases every year 90 million tons of CO2, just scope 1 and 2. China released 2.5 billion tons of CO2. So if you really want to resolve global warming, it's not just warming, it's global warming, you need to go where the problem is. And the problem is in China. Of course, Nike doesn't want to do that. Hollywood doesn't want to do that. Fox doesn't want to do that. CNN doesn't want to do that. They like the 1.4 billion people that buy stuff over there. But they are the problem. They are the problem. Numbers don't lie. And when you compare with the entire world, then you see more clearly. China alone is 2/3 of the CO2 problem. The rest of the world is 36%. We are 2% of the thing. So it's clear, because the numbers are the numbers, that as far as scope 1 and 2, the US is not the source of the problem. The source of the problem, let me think about it. I think it's China. So the United States actually is the benchmark on these things. With tons of CO2 emissions per ton of steel produced, scope 1 and 2, that's how we compare with other countries. 1 ton of steel produced in the United States, 1 ton of CO2. 1 ton of steel produced in China, 2.5 times, 2.5 tons of CO2. So every single ton of steel produced in China releases 2.5 times more steel than the same ton of steel produced in the United States. And some other countries that talk a good game, they're not that good. They talk a good game, but they're not that good. See Germany, 80% worse than us. See South Korea. I have a chapter apart for South Korea. South Korea, you know, sometimes I like the friends a lot less than I like the enemies, because the enemies are a lot clearer on their intentions. South Korea is a problem. They believe that we're an extension, like a backyard of them, and that's not good because they pollute a lot, 2 times the pollution that we release here. And you keep going. So I think you got the picture. So the unique characteristics of the American steel industry that makes us that good, why we're so good. First one, no doubt about, scrap. We have a prevalence of electric arc furnaces in the United States that is impossible to replicate in the entire world. We got to a point that we are now 71% electric arc furnaces. Very soon will be 75% electric arc furnaces. Only 25% in the blast furnace BOF route. That's a big thing. Also, because the United States developed the steel industry during the 20th century, when we were the manufacturing center of the world, we generated so much scrap, we had so much scrap available, that was not just supporting the EAF, it was also changing the BOF practices to a point that we always maximize the utilization of scrap, even in BOFs. So the scrap is key for the fact that we are so environmentally friendly. The next very important thing in this important profile of the United States as far as the environment is natural gas. We have a lot of natural gas-based electricity. I'll be showing some numbers in a few minutes. We can use natural gas as a reductant in direct reduction in DRI production, and we also are developing and increasing to a high level the use of natural gas as supplemental reductant in blast furnaces. And the third one that's sometimes forgotten, but we don't forget, and we know, and the data shows the numbers as well, the massive utilization of pellets in blast furnaces. At Cleveland-Cliffs, we run 8 blast furnaces. They run 100% on pellets, no sinter. We have 2 sinter plants, which I shut down when I acquired ArcelorMittal. They are used now only to recycle mill scale. We do not sinter anything on those sinter plants. We do not use sinter feed. We do not use sinter. It's gone. So the United States uses pellets, and pellets have an advantage against sinter of 85% in terms of CO2 emissions. Then the next question that would come, so the solution for China is pellets, yes. But the problem with China is that China needs Australia. And Australia has a lot of iron ore. But Australia does not have the other thing that's needed to produce pellets. It's called water. The Pilbara is a desert. The Pilbara Yilgarn in the west coast of Australia is one of the biggest deserts in the planet. So they don't have fresh water, different from the United States. We sit our iron ore reserves in northern Minnesota and in the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. They sit by the Great Lakes. And that's the biggest reserve of fresh water in the world. 21% of the fresh water of the world is right here in the Great Lakes. That's a huge differentiation. So the adoption of pellets in China would be phenomenal for the environment, very detrimental for Australia. It's feasible, but it changed completely the game because the Australians would have to grind down iron ore from sinter feed to pellet feed, what's like, it's the difference between dirt and baby powder, for the ones that are not familiar with the granulometry of iron feed, and then move that thing to places that have water, like the Philippines, like Malaysia, even China. So it's a different ballgame, but if you really want to fix the environment, that's the way to go. They have a lot of modern blast furnaces over there, all of them using massive amounts of sinter and producing massive amounts of CO2. In our case, actually, we import some CO2 from countries that produce pig iron. And the main three are Brazil, Russia, and Ukraine. A lot of what our EAFs do is to produce flat rolled. You cannot produce flat rolled like CMC does a great job producing long products and producing rebar and wide flange beams. When you go flat rolled, you need metallics. And because we don't have enough metallics here in the US, the mini mills that produce flat rolled import pig iron. The number, give or take, 6 million net tons of pig iron imported each year. For a EAF, this is just a representative for an EAF, a burden of an EAF that produces flat rolled would be 50% imported pig iron, 25% prime scrap, 25% obsolete scrap. You might question if it's a little more obsolete, a little less prime, a little less pig iron, but these are representative numbers, and this pig iron comes with CO2 in Scope 3. This is Scope 3 because it comes in, we call Scope 3 upstream. We don't care much about Scope 3 downstream because every single steel producer is chasing the same client and trying to sell to the same type of clientele. So Scope 3 downstream is not the issue. The issue is Scope 3 upstream. And that's what imported pig iron brings. So when you do Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 comparison, look how interesting the thing stands, numbers-wise. This is our Cliffs Dearborn as of now. We're not done. We own AK Steel since March 13, 2020, for a little more than a year. We have been working to transform Dearborn into a very environmentally friendly blast furnace, as well as the other 7 blast furnaces that we have. But I'm using Dearborn because Dearborn was the first that we started working with. So at Dearborn, as of now, our Scope 1 emissions are 0.55 and Scope 2 are 0.40. So if you add both, it's 0.95. So we're below the 1 that I used to represent the United States. A US flat-rolled mill, mini mill that I will not nominate, but it's a real mill, it's not an average or anything like that, has Scope 1 0.3 and Scope 2 0.3. What makes 0.6? What's a lot better than the 1 that I used as a reference. But now, let's add upstream Scope 3 to see what happens. In our case, we're adding 0.68. Like I said, we use 100% pellets. We have to transport the pellets. We use limestone, we use coke, we use nitrogen, and we use oxygen. The US flat-rolled mini mill use 50% pig iron, needs to transport the pig iron, use electrodes, nitrogen, and inject oxygen inside the furnace, like a small BOF. And then the numbers change. Look at that. The pig iron is a contribution of 1. What's half of 2? Because it's 50%. So our number is 1.63. The mini mill is 1.80. Phil Bell, welcome to numbers. That's how the numbers work. Scrap is a precious metal. It's already scarce. And now we're putting another batch of electric arc furnaces. All great, all modern, all phenomenal. They all produce high-quality product. They all chase the same scrap. And that's what we're going to have here. The majority of these electric arc furnaces are already in operation, or at least the construction is already in motion. The problem is that, different from the 20th century, when we developed the electric arc furnace industry to produce flat-rolled steel, starting in 1989 with Ken Iverson at Crawfordsville, Indiana, we are not at the back end of a century of manufacturing anymore. That manufacturing that existed here moved to China. So at the end of the 21st century, China will be like we were, scrap-wise, at the end of the 20th century. But we are far from the end of the 21st century. So at this point, what we have is a 5-year plan from the Communist Party in China, written by Xi Jinping, that they will increase the 10% consumption of scrap that they had in 2020, and they will go to 30% in 2025. And believe me, they will go. If they decide to do, they do. Actually, the EAFs that they were supposed to build have already been built, and they are using a lot more scrap in BOFs. They continue to copy what we do. What's the surprise? They have been doing that forever. So they will continue to try to copy us. But the problem is that the scrap that was already scarce here and will be even more scarce as we continue to build capacity will have to be shared with the massive consumption that will exist in China, and before their manufacturing will result in more scrap available inside their country. So I'm talking about the next decade. I'm not talking about the next century. So for the next decade, as the title of my presentation, a tug of war for scrap is shaping up between the United States and China. And don't forget, U.S. prime scrap is inelastic. Another thing that we hear sometimes, and it's too much of a simplification, is scrap cannot be used in closed loop. It would be great if we could just melt and remelt and remelt and remelt and remelt forever. Unfortunately, metallurgy doesn't work like that. Every time we do that, you add stuff. And when you start adding stuff like copper, you are starting to poison the thing, and you end up with unusable scrap for the purposes that they were designated in the first place. How to fix that? Like in all closed circuits, you need makeup. The makeup comes from metallics. Pig iron, hopefully not produced with sinter, DRI, and HBI. EAFs will continue to rely on iron reduction from outside sources in order to continue to recycle and do a great job recycling scrap. What about us here at Cleveland-Cliffs? Well, we are now the largest flat-rolled steel producer in North America. And we like that. We believe that we are a pole of attraction for new talent, new young people that want to join our effort and continue to build a powerhouse to supply American manufacturing. We are also fully integrated from mined raw materials to primary steel making to downstream stamping, tooling, tubular components. We are a first-tier supplier of all car manufacturers in the United States. That's what the word integrated means. Also, we are a steel market leader in automotive industry, sales and quality. Lots of people like to claim leadership. I am a numbers guy. We sell 5 million tons, 4.5 million tons of carbon steel and 500,000 tons of stainless steel to the automotive industry. 4.5 plus 0.5 is 5. And the second largest is 2. That's what leadership is. So we can give up one, and we're still twice as big as the second. That's how it works. And I'm not into size. Again, this is a business. I like returns. So I'm just giving you the picture that what we have right now. We supply 5 million tons to the automotive steel industry as we speak. Also, we have a track record of commercial excellence and a disciplined approach to supply. My executive vice president of commercial is Brian Bishop. He used to be vice president of operations at AK Steel. I like this thing of having an operations guy running commercial. It worked very well for a guy that I know, Lorenzo Gonçalves. And I keep telling Brian that the only difference is that he knows a lot more than me when I got to run commercial, and I mean it. So that makes life a lot easier for me and for all of our 25,000 employees at Cleveland-Cliffs. And don't believe that disciplined approach to supply means that we are denying steel to the market, because we are not. We just don't chase that last ton that will just be value destructive. As simple as that. Again, just plain numbers, nothing else. And last but not least, we have a real commitment with environmental, social, and governance. We are not into the trendy ESG thing. I have been talking about environment at the AISI pretty much since I rejoined when I went to Cleveland-Cliffs. At the time, when we were discussing other things, I was talking environmental. At the time, it was like a side show, and nobody would like to talk about environmental. As of now, Kevin Dempsey, what have we been talking in the AISI? Can you say out loud? Sustainability. And environmental. So that's what we talk. Sustainability and environmental. That's the thing. Do you know why? Because we don't need to hide. We are the best in the world on that. We need to explain why we are, how we got here, and how we're going to keep that position. That's as simple as that. But we're talking. Social, I embrace the unions. Unions are necessary. Not every single company is Nucor. Not every single boss is good. Unions are necessary. If all companies are as good as Nucor or Steel Dynamics, we did not need unions. If all companies care about their employees like we care about Cleveland-Cliffs, the employees of Cleveland-Cliffs, we did not need unions. But unfortunately, life is different. So we embrace the unions. We work together with them in real partnership to build a better work environment. And we don't have a problem with that. Actually, we find solutions together. And very importantly, I believe in inclusive capitalism. I believe that capitalism is the best thing in the world, but has to be shared. We need to share. Henry Ford was right. Your employees are your consumers, but they need to make money to be consumers. You need to allow them to have a middle-class, rewarding life, that they can take care of their families, that they are able to stand high and stand tall. So that's how we see our role and how we try to handle and try to pay our people. We are proud to be the highest paying company in our industry, and I'm not going to move out of that position. That's a leadership position that I will continue to defend. That's our new operational footprint. The map's kind of funny. I don't know why it's looking like that, but was supposed to be the map of the Midwest with all of our locations. I will call your attention to a few. There's not a typo with 2 Dearborns. This is because when we acquired AK Steel, the very first thing that we did, we shut down the hot strip mill of Dearborn. The hot strip mill did not belong. It was a narrow hot strip mill feeding the most modern downstream facility. Actually, the last one built for automotive in the United States at Dearborn by Severstal, by the way, the predecessor owner of before AK Steel, with a very modern PLTCM, pickling line, turning cold mill, and galvanizing line, wide, high quality material to automotive uses. And so we have a hot end in Dearborn, that's one plant, and a downstream facility that's very similar to the one that we have in Rockport, Indiana. I say very similar because Rockport, Indiana is a lot wider in terms of galvanized. We produce 6'8" material, 6 feet 8 inches material in Rockport, the widest in the country, for sure one of the widest in the world, if not the widest in the world, in Rockport. We also have, in the same line of business, we have Tech and Coat in New Carlisle, Indiana, which I acquired half from ArcelorMittal and half from Nippon Steel through the acquisition of ArcelorMittal USA. And we also own Columbus Coatings in Columbus, Ohio, to the same end. And then we have the galvanizing lines in the integrated plants, Cleveland, Indiana Harbor, Burns Harbor. We also have 4 electric arc furnace plants. Butler, producing electrical steels, Mansfield, producing stainless steel, Coatesville, producing plate, and Stilton, producing rail. So we are the proud operators of 4 EAFs. And I believe, Phil Bell, that I qualify to be a member of the SMA because of that. I'm thinking about it. I will go give you a call. We also have lots of downstream facilities that produce parts and components for clients, particularly for the automotive industry. That's what galvanized steel for the automotive industry, exposed parts, look like. It's beautiful. It's the core product for an integrated steel mill, exposed parts for the auto. Without us, all cars would be like those cars at Mad Max, with no doors, no ceiling, no cover for the engines, you know, would be just the structure, which, by the way, we produce too, but we are the ones that produce the body of the car. And that's what's called a door ring. This is our facility in Ontario, producing double ring for a door of a car. And we have several throughout the country. We have another one in Sylacauga, Alabama. We have one in Bowling Green, Kentucky. We are about to start up a new one in Cleveland, Tennessee, close to Chattanooga, to supply the car manufacturers. We put these plants in full development, multi-year developments with the car manufacturers. That's how you get to 5 million tons a year. It's not just going there and offering your services. We have a multi-year research and development work in the background with these companies, and that's how you really lock these deals for the long run. So this is what we do. This is why we are kind of irreplaceable for these guys. Enough about downstream. Let's talk a little bit about upstream. I really saw, we at Cleveland-Cliffs, we saw the shift toward EAFs, and we really, really would like to supply EAFs. So we invested $1 billion to put a new, very modern plant, the most modern Midrex plant in the world. We started up the plant in December of 2020, 6 months ago, in Toledo, Ohio. It's natural gas-based hot briquetted iron produced in Toledo. very capable in terms of capacity, 1.9 million metric tons a year capacity. We are running this plant above capacity at this point, so our pace is for more like 2 million, 2-point-something million tons a year. And our product is hot briquetted iron. We use natural gas, and we are at this point, as part of an integrated company, using this plant to supply our blast furnaces. In our blast furnaces, this HBI increases productivity very significantly, and it's very simple to understand. HBI is direct reduced iron. So the iron that we put inside the blast furnaces is not oxide anymore. It's metal. It's Fe metal. So it's already reduced. So you don't need coke to reduce that part of the burden because that's pre-reduced. That's how blast furnaces benefit from the use of HBI. And because you're using less coke, you're generating a lot less CO2. As simple as that. Less carbon, less CO2. Same thing in our EAFs. Actually, the fact that we are no longer buying prime scrap, which is a good thing for the ones that really need prime scrap, other companies, is giving us not only gains in productivity due to the fact that we're using a very homogeneous feedstock, but also even the properties of some of our products, like the electrical properties of our grain-oriented electric steels, were improved by the fact that we're using our own HBI. And by the way, it's HBI coming from a single source of pellets from our North Shore mine in Silver Bay, Minnesota. So that's very unique, even recognized by Midrex. We also using our VOFs because we used to buy prime scrap for the VOFs. Now we're using our HBI, and we still sell some tonnage to some clients that helped us develop the plant, companies that I consider partners, and we are very pleased that we still sell to Nucor, to Steel Dynamics, and North Star Blue Scoop. And all three I'm trying to keep as long as I can, but our internal consumption keeps increasing, and I don't know for how long I'm going to have that feedstock for them. For now, so far, so good. And that comes with a lot of reductions in terms of emission. First, because we are using 100% natural gas as reductant. There's no coal, no coke, no nothing, just natural, good old natural gas. And we have an advantage of 70% against this foreign metallics, like I explained with pig iron. Natural gas is both a power source and a reducing agent. It's very important for our colleagues to know that here in the United States, at this very moment, 47% of our electricity that we use in the steel business comes from natural gas. That's against an average in the world of only 11%. And in China, and by the way, China has natural gas. So that's a kind of a mystery to me why they don't put their natural gas to good use. China is only 2%. Also, the use of coal, people talk a good game in terms of getting rid of coal. The only ones that are really getting rid of coal, the United States. Only 24% of our electricity goes through coal. The global average is still an amazing 64%. In China, 76% of electricity based on coal. And it's interesting how things are. Our little supplier of little for United States standard, big company, excellent partner, Minnesota Power, that supplies our mines in the Iron Range, they have more than 50% of their electricity already from renewables. That's not even natural gas, renewables, wind, stuff like that. More than 50%. So we here in the United States in this environmental thing, we are just not advertising well, but we are doing a lot. Last but not least, natural gas in blast furnaces. That's another thing that changed the game. Again, I use Dearborn for the other one, using Middletown here, just because of furnace that we own for longer. But everything that we started in March of 2020 in Middletown and Dearborn, we started in Indiana Harbor, Burns Harbor, Cleveland, as soon as we acquired ArcelorMittal. So we just have more data from the blast furnace that we have for longer. So our coke rate is down dramatically just by the massive use of natural gas through the 2 years in a blast furnace. And now we're using all 8 blast furnaces at Cleveland-Cliffs. And with that, we have already, as of now, we're not done. We already we have achieved a reduction of coke usage of 750,000 tons of coke per year, company-wide. And that's the equivalent of one coke battery shutdown already. We'll continue to increase, and we'll continue to reduce CO2 in our blast furnaces. At this very point, our 8 blast furnaces are among the lowest greenhouse gas intensive in the entire world. Nothing better in Japan, nothing better in South Korea, nothing better in Germany, nothing better in France, nothing better in Luxembourg. You got the picture. I keep track of all of them. We are a lot better. Pellets, HBI, natural gas in blast furnaces. I swear, I only use this picture in a place like the AIST. I will never use this in for a different audience, because I believe that you guys not only understand, but like this type of stuff. So, blast furnace use coke, use limestone for slag. In our case, we use HBI, and also in our case, we use 100% iron ore pellets with our 85% advantage over sinter. We also put air and natural gas through the 2 years. And then, if we didn't have natural gas, we would be producing CO as a reductant and use CO as a reductant. With natural gas, look what a beauty. We produce hydrogen, and the reductant is hydrogen. That's hydrogen. The hydrogen that people talk about. What people talk about, we're using, because we use natural gas. In other words, the path toward using hydrogen in a furnace is natural gas. If you believe that hydrogen will replace coke, think again. Coke in a blast furnace has mechanical support of the burden function. You can't do that with gas. So the way to do it is through the 2 years. And the way to get there is using natural gas, which, by the way, is cheap and easily available in the United States. Europe talks a lot about hydrogen, and the reason is simple. That's Europe. They don't have natural gas. If they had natural gas, they would talk about natural gas. But because they don't, they talk hydrogen. At Cleveland-Cliffs right now, I am using the following strategy. Every single company or scientist or entrepreneur that talks about hydrogen receives a call from me. And I bring in Cleveland-Cliffs, and I ask them how much you need to finish your product to the end. And I'm volunteering to finance their development to the end with a time frame. Do you know how many so far signed the contract with me? 0. Because their plan is not to produce hydrogen. Their plan is to talk about